economy is rapidly becoming a promising market for Swedish companies. What are the opportunities ahead as India ramps up climate action and green investments? Get the inside view in this episode of Business Sweden News. India's economy accelerates amid global downturn. How can Swedish companies support sustainable development? And how will a free trade agreement between the EU and India impact market potential? India is in the spotlight as it overtakes China as the world's most populous nation, while also stepping into its new role as a manufacturing and logistics hub in Asia. With a rapidly expanding middle class and ambitious investments to transform its energy, infrastructure, and industries, India is on track to become the world's third largest economy by 2027, surpassing both Japan and Germany. Can India become the next green superpower? How can Swedish companies support the drive for sustainable development? And how will revived negotiations for a free trade agreement between the EU and India change the playing field? With me in the studio today, I have Cecilia Oskarsson, Sweden's Trade and Invest Commissioner to India. Welcome, Cecilia.
Thank you.
Let's start by exploring India's growing attractiveness for global companies. Why is India becoming a new supply chain hub in Asia?
India has been a supply chain hub for quite some time, maybe not the most important one, and I'm not sure it will be the most important one going forward. However, there are many factors that is making India more and more attractive in the future. One of those is, of course, the geopolitical alignment that India has, or maybe the strategic non-alignment, where India is placing itself as a very neutral partner. We're talking about friendshoring and regionalization, and here India will definitely play a role. They are also aligning with Quad, I2U2, etc. And companies today, American, European, even Eastern Asian countries like Japanese companies are definitely looking into investing and producing in India right now. Second of all, cost advantage of India is still there, not only labor cost, but also land, utility, and other concessional corporate tax advantages we can clearly still see. Further on, the Indian government is very much focused on different incentives like Make in India, Digital India, but also Skill India. And that is definitely promoting the domestic manufacturing. And fourthly, it's worth mentioning India's strategic location between Middle East, Africa, and Europe, with a very long coastline. And I do also want to mention that India has an enormous amount of young, English-speaking, very well-educated talent. The political environment is fairly stable when we compare to other parts of the world. And also, India has improved a lot on the ease of doing business lately.
And we know that India is ramping up its focus on sustainable development, and it's got quite an ambitious green transition strategy. Which specific industries are there opportunities for Swedish companies?
There are opportunities for Swedish companies across all sectors, but maybe I can mention three. First one being, of course, life science. Second one, infrastructure, with the great Gati Shakti, the infrastructure scheme that is ongoing since some time, where especially aviation has focus for Swedish companies. And thirdly, we cannot help but need to mention green transition. Within green transition, we do have green energy, we have the green hydrogen, where many Swedish companies has the capacity to really meet the Indian demands here. And what we can do at Business Sweden is really connect them to the Indian partners.
And I can only imagine, I don't work in India, you do, but that business climate is quite different from what companies might have experienced in the West. How do Swedish companies navigate that, and how do they adapt when they enter the market?
I think one of the most important and the first thing you have to remember and you have to look into is the sheer size of India. Not only India has the biggest population of the biggest populated country in the world, but also India as a country is very big. So there is not one enter India strategy. you have to look where you enter and make maybe a few different strategies. And it's also very important that you definitely make up your mind on where you place your business, and where you are. And it's also, as in many of the other Asian countries, very important that you do it long term. It's no point of toe dipping and think you will be able to handle India with your left arm. That's not going to work. I think you also have to factor in both the domestic demand, but also the global and export potential when you're looking into India. But at the same time, we do have to cope, and we have to bear in mind the quite complex bureaucratic processes, but also the equally time consuming and sometimes very frustrating legal system, and also the complex tax system. I also would like to talk about the sometimes very protectionistic policies that we see in India, which, if you work with them in the right way, can actually play in your hands, like Make in India and all the PLI schemes, who actually, if you know how to use them and if they are in your sector, can actually benefit you, and there are economic gains to win for that. I also maybe should mention the demographic dividends in India, where there is a lot of skilled labor. But when it comes to blue collar workers, as a company, you do have to make sure that you invest in on the job training and maybe even sometimes vocational training. Of course, India has a specific culture, and there are culture differences between Swedish companies. And it's very important that we understand that there are many official languages in India. There are also very different business practices, and sometimes even different social norms that we are used to. So, to sum up all this, there are tremendous opportunities for Swedish companies, but you do have to keep in mind also the challenges. And of course, we are always there to help when it comes to that.
And how do Swedish companies actually do that? I mean, how do they tap into those opportunities and find out where to enter the market and access those big potentials?
I think we have many Swedish companies who've been in the country for more than 100 years. They have good knowledge, so use them, but also use other organizations and local knowledge that can help you. It's almost impossible to enter as a small medium-sized company to enter India on your own, but use the network that we have there.
Okay, now let's cross over to hear directly from two Swedish companies who are expanding their presence in India. First, to you, Rickard. Why is India an attractive market for Absoltech, and in what industries are you seeing a growing demand for your supplies?
Well, I think if we look around in the world right now, there is a geopolitical situation where I mean, historically, China has been the factory of the world, and they do have the labor and they do have the output over there. But I think what people are doing now is to look for alternatives. But to do that, you need to find a country which is, I would say, not typically equal size China, but big enough to take on board the output that is needed. And there's where India comes into the picture. And I think also recently we see the bigger companies entering into India with companies like Apple. I think there are 7% iPhones this year. And when they enter the arena, then all their sub-suppliers and the electronic clusters will come. So for us, that means, of course, new potential business opportunities. So to reply to your question, what industries are we looking at? Well, we look at automotive, we look at electronics, agricultural, beverage. So very many of them takes India, I would say.
So that's quite a cross sector that you're working with there. Can you give us some examples of how you're helping those industries or others in India to reduce their environmental impact?
I mean, we as a company are having sustainability very high on our agenda. Basically, what we do is to protect shipments from being scrapped due to moisture damages. And of course, if India is taking on board more production now, that also means more export and more containers to be protected. And I mean, what we see and the steps taken now in India is very much sustainability in the forefront. And of course, again, it comes crossroads with what we are representing.
And to what extent do your customers in India value the fact that you're selling products manufactured in Sweden? How do they perceive Swedish suppliers?
I mean, historically, Sweden and India have had business together, and as countries, we know each other's a little bit. And I think the Indian perspective is that Sweden is representing high quality, it's representing sustainability, and again, coming back to the two things that we have discussed recently. So, sustainability in all, I mean, both the E and the S and the G in sustainability is sort of aligning with what India is doing currently.
Great. And Harmeet, your company Hitachi Energy has identified India as a key growth market, and you've recently inaugurated a manufacturing facility in Bangalore. Why is Hitachi Energy expanding in India, and how are you supporting the country's energy transition?
Thanks a lot. Just as a quick introduction, Hitachi Energy is in 90 countries, but of course, India is a key focus for us, but not just as a market. It's a focus for us as a market, as a manufacturing base, as an R&D hub, and as a major global engineering center as well. We've been in India now for more than 6 decades, and we have nearly 20 factories now across the country. So, it's a very extensive presence. And in fact, you brought up, Sarah, the Bangalore factory. After that, we also commissioned another one in Chennai. So we've now basically commissioned 3 new manufacturing units in the last 2 years. So it is a rapid expansion as well from the point of view. Again, coming back to your original question about what is prompting this to a great extent, we're in a very sweet spot in terms of the energy transition. And so the energy transition is capturing really pace across the world. India has set some very stringent targets, including ambitions like adding 500 gigawatts of renewables by 2030. It's all part of the 2070 carbon neutrality journey. But I think a country with 1.4 billion people, now almost the largest population in the world, and again, historically, India's electricity consumption is still way below global averages. So the consumption of electricity in India will not just continue to grow, but grow rapidly. And of course, the focus is more and more on clean electricity. And that's where we come in, and especially in terms of the transportation of that electricity from the points of generation to the points of consumption.